Hi, hope you guys are doing well. It's time for another video, and in this one I want to take a look at 3 things that House of the Dragon already does better than Game of Thrones. I know it's a bit early for such statements, but I'm feeling very confident about the points that I'll make in this video. Also, I want to note that we are mainly going to compare House of the Dragon to Game of Thrones Season 5 to Season 8. Also, this is all just my personal opinion, it's just preference, this whole thing is subjective. So let's chill. Anyways, let's start with number 1. Yes, I think the writing of House of the Dragon is incredibly clear of the writing of the later seasons of Game of Thrones. And I think the main reason behind that is just the approach. This show is written by a collective of people rather than being a two-man show. It's been in development for years, and the main guy, Ryan Condal, is a huge A Song of Ice and Fire fan. You've probably heard that a couple of times by now, and I really think that this is paying off. And I really believe him, because you can just feel with how much love, care and respect these characters are written. George R. R. Martin is of course also involved again after not being involved in the writing of the last couple of seasons. George R. R. Martin's own writing assistant Ty McKell is part of the writing team. Ryan Condal also described working on House of the Dragon as like working on Lord of the Rings, but Tolkien is around. You can just ask him questions, and Ryan always made sure to involve George as much as he could. I think it would have been awesome if George came back for a couple of episodes. He wrote some fantastic episodes for Game of Thrones, such as Blackwater or The Lion and the Rose, but I get it. I definitely get it. The man should focus on The Winds of Winter, and he already is distracted enough. But still, he is involved, and I consider that to be a very good thing. When we look at the dialogue of this show, it becomes very clear that this is written by people who truly understand this world. The dialogue was a big worry for me going into the show, because there really isn't as much there. If you look at A Song of Ice and Fire, you have so much dialogue that you can implement. When you look at Fire and Blood, there really isn't as much there, and even then it's all biased. So the context of those quotes is never really revealed, and context always matters. So to see this like Shakespearean talk that these characters talk in House of the Dragon is very impressive, because it comes out of nowhere. They didn't have all that much and made it up on the spot, and to me it works very well. It suits this world very well, and I just prefer the way our characters talk in House of the Dragon. If you look at Game of Thrones, especially early on, it was amazing. Even some of the original stuff that David and Dan wrote. Robert and Cersei early on, or the scenes we have with Tywin and Arya at Harrenhal. Or if you look at that big Littlefinger monologue that's completely original, but it just kind of got worse and worse with each and every season, and by the end of the show they pretty much just talk like regular people. Having these characters talk the way they're talking on House of the Dragon just adds to the overall storytelling, and A Song of Ice and Fire was always like an escape place for me, and this just makes it so much easier to really just dive deep into this world and forget about everything else that is going on. So yeah, I definitely prefer the writing of House of the Dragon over the last couple of seasons. It's not perfect, we might get into that in a different video. So let's continue with our next point. With Magic of A Song of Ice and Fire, I do not only mean the literal magic, I mean just the feeling of A Song of Ice and Fire. I think House of the Dragon feels way more like A Song of Ice and Fire than Game of Thrones did in a very long time. This show really plays with themes and, okay, magical aspects that Game of Thrones never bothered with. Game of Thrones oftentimes was a dumbed down version of A Song of Ice and Fire. It appealed more to the masses, which was very much the approach of the showrunners. They wanted to appeal to everyone. The story featured a lot of stereotypical things over the last couple of seasons. House of the Dragon, on the other hand, doesn't shy away from throwing in subtle little hints that will add up to the story and explode in those big twists a couple of seasons down the line. For example, let's compare the big twist of season 6 of Game of Thrones to something that I think is going on in House of the Dragon. It was very obvious that they were setting up the explosion of the Sept of Baelor in season 6 of Game of Thrones, whereas in House of the Dragon, the Maesters making Aemma Arryn bathe in tepid water might be an early sign of malice on their part, which in turn could be set up for a big Maesters conspiracy. Shout out to the question I got a couple of months ago for our episode 1 Q&A. You're a legend. House of the Dragon also doesn't shy away to throw in the magical aspects of A Song of Ice and Fire, like The White Stag plot in episode 5, even though that may be the weakest episode of House of the Dragon, just signals that they are not shying away from the mystical things as well, and Helena being a prophetic dreamer on House of the Dragon also shows that they are still pulling from the main A Song of Ice and Fire series. And that is very clever in my opinion. They can still pull from those books and pick things and add them to the characters here in a way that makes sense. Helena being a prophetic dreamer, I really like that because we don't have all that much in Fire and Blood about her character, and this just adds to that whole thing, to that whole tragedy that is surrounding her anyway, and I'm very curious to see where this goes. And another thing that just helps transfer the magic of A Song of Ice and Fire to this show is just the way it looks. I'm sure you all heard Ryan Condal talking about decadence about 500 times now, and by the 15th time, I got it. Yes, okay, this is the time of the peak of House Targaryen. It really shows. Everything is colorful, the Red Keep feels alive, the dragons look very colorful, which is something that I really like. They all have their own distinct frame and nature, and I really enjoy that. Our characters also have multiple costumes, which I don't think Game of Thrones ever had a problem with. A lot of the characters of Game of Thrones seem to have their one iconic signature costume. I don't think that's a bad thing, but I just think it adds to that overall feel if these characters get to wear multiple things. We gotta remember these characters are highborn. They have all the resources in the world, so sure, they should be able to have those chains and rings and whatnot. A good example here is Sir Criston Cole, who is of course not highborn. He is the son to the steward of the Lord of Blackhaven. He kept saying that, and by the 15th time, similarly to Ryan Condal, we understood that, but it made sense that he wore this very dull armor in the tourney, in contrast to what the other proud lords and participants of that tourney were wearing. And those are just the little things that just add to that overall thing. Daemon Targaryen's armor, on the other hand, is amazing in my opinion. Sure, some people didn't like it as much as I do, and we're talking about like the practicality of that thing, but I just think this just looks like one of those A Song of Ice and Fire artworks. Like, it really reminds me of Rhaegar on the Trident, for example. And overall, I just like the attention to detail here. It accompanies the writing and it transfers very well onto the screen. So let's move on to our next and last point for today's video. It might seem completely ridiculous for me to even compare the two. A Song of Ice and Fire is of course so fleshed out. We have so much more detail when it comes to the characters we have in A Song of Ice and Fire, but that is the point. The characters in A Song of Ice and Fire are not the characters we have in Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones very much turned into this classic good against evil. All the good guys came together to fight the bad guys, and then again all the good guys came together to fight Daenerys in the end because the script demanded it. A good example for this is Peter Dinklage as Tyrion Lannister. The character we have in the books is just completely different, which kind of makes it sad to look back to the possibility of Peter Dinklage actually getting to play that character. And this is where House of the Dragon comes in. So far, they're definitely not shying away from showing the horrible acts of these characters. Even though the balance between blacks and greens is just not yet there in my opinion, the nuance will come in when we reach certain events that will just shake up this entire discourse. This is just a match made in heaven because you have this very stereotypical thing, this choosing sides between two fractions, but both sides do horrible things, so you have this amazing opportunity to have amazing discussions, and that will make it so much more entertaining. It's very layered, and I like that. I will always prefer this over the classic good against evil. So, all in all, I have a very good feeling about House of the Dragon. I think it's in very good hands. Is it perfect? No, but it is nowhere near as bad as it once was. I could go into it in more detail in another video. Let me know down below if you would want that. The big civil war wasn't going to run away, and yet we're already here. I get the reasoning behind it. The masses are not here for politicking. They are here for the Dance of the Dragons. I think while House of the Dragon might not yet be on Game of Thrones season 1 till season 4 level, if it's all said and done, House of the Dragon as a finished product might surpass Thrones if it keeps the attention to detail. And that is all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember, all I said in this video is subjective. We can agree to disagree. Other than that, feel free to subscribe, would very much appreciate that. And until then, Take care and see us later.